No mai haere mai, ko Joy King, toko ingoa, ko o te rangatira te ropu, waihanga kimu o Aotearoa. Hello and welcome. My name is Joy Keen and I'm the Executive Director of the New Zealand Game Developers Association. This week we have another webinar on the GDSR. It must be the time of year. Last week, we spoke with Lance Burgess about accounting for the GDSR, and today we welcome Amy and her team from NZ On Air to take us through the final application process. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Amy.
Kia ora, Joy. Thank you for that intro. No mai haere mai, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Amy Mills taku ingoa, ko aho te tumuaki o ngā tāke pūtea ki Irarangi te motu. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Amy Mills and I'm the Head of Funding at New Zealand On Air. I'm actually standing in today for Chantel Cole, who's our Program Director of the GDSR, but who's overseas at the moment. So I will do my best to fill those very big shoes. But Luke, if you don't mind flicking to the next slide. So Joy's right, we're sort of barreling towards the deadline for the final applications for the first year of the GDSR. So we thought this was a really good moment in time to do a bit of an update for applicants who've gone through the registration process. So we want to cover off a little bit of just a snapshot of any of the latest updates broadly around the GDSR that we might not have covered in the last webinar. But really critically, the guts of this presentation was around, there's about 6 small areas where we've made some clarifications to our general guidelines and notes around eligible expenditure. Nothing that's materially changed, but just additional information that we've had raised with us that we want to provide clarification on. And we thought the best way to do this was through the webinar and have it recorded so others can refer back to it, and also step you through the portal. So a whole lot of screenshots from our application portal so that people could get a kind of familiarity with the information that is going to be asked of you, and any detail we can provide around that. And we'll re-look at the timing so everybody's really crystal clear on timeframes of where we step through from now. And of course, any questions, and as Joy mentioned, please do put your hand up or just shout out while we're going through these slides, because we want to be able to respond to things as they come up for you. So I won't introduce the team. If you flip to the next slide, Luke, the way we've done it in the past, because we've done it a lot of the times on the different webinars. So if you're not familiar with the team and the faces, we've done kind of face-to-face, hello, here's who we are, but it was just to let you know. There's probably just a note, obviously, that we've got Chantel on board as the program director, and she's been on board now for a couple of months, and she's leading the charge. So I've really stepped back, but I'm still kind of involved and able to step in if she's unavailable. But the other key one to note is probably that our wonderful business affairs advisor, Rebecca Tang, has stepped in to fill Connell Aird's shoes. So people might have been dealing with Connell through the pilot phase and through the general registration potentially, but Rebecca's stepping into that role now. So you'll probably get to meet her in due course if you're putting an application in. And otherwise, that's us. And a few of us are on the call today as well. So if I just jump into the latest updates for everyone, I thought one of the most useful things to share is just around the registration process that we went through kind of late last year and finalised it at the beginning of this year. And this was our process that helps us make sure we're aware that everybody who will be wanting to apply for the rebate at the end of the eligibility period actually meets the requirements as laid out under the GDSR of being an eligible business, reaching the estimated eligible threshold of 250,000 New Zealand dollars of expenditure in order to be able to reach that threshold. So we ran a process where we asked everybody to register with us, give us their estimated call that they thought they would be making, the ask of the GDSR based on the eligible expenditure and what they predict for the remaining eligibility period. And we processed all of those sort of systematically. And so it was just to let everybody know that we've had 36 studios go through that process and be successfully registered. So that means we're expecting 36 applications to come into us after the deadline closes. And the estimated call on the GDSR, so this is not set in stone, because obviously people were trying to look at what they projected would be expenditure up until 30 March. But that estimated call is looking like it could be about 29.6 million on the GDSR in year one. And that includes 10.2 million that's been administered already through that one-off pilot phase that we did just as part of our first year, and really as a way to support the sector to make sure money was going out the door before Christmas last year, when the sector was really in need of it. So that was just a one-off with the pilot phase. So it's just to give you a snapshot of the full ask. Those studios that then were successfully registered got sent their letters of acknowledgement, so that they knew that they had been kind of given the thumbs up that said, yep, according to what you've provided, this all looks good. We're expecting to get a final application for you at the end of year one. And we also went through a statement of readiness process with those successfully registered applicants, which was around, it was a sort of like a checklist really, to try and understand from each of the applicants just how you were processing your financial information, had kind of got a sense of where you're at. Would you need some extra support in terms of compiling your final application? And that process has gone really well and quite smoothly, and didn't have any major issues throughout. So it was really a process of us getting to know applicants as well, those that might not have been known to us already. And then we've got final applications open for people to start submitting their final application from the 1st of April. And the deadline for when we close the submissions portal is the 30th of April. So we're expecting most people to come in towards the end of the 30th of April, but there might be some very organised people who are going to get it to us earlier. So that's that. And if you move on, Luke. So this is where there's a couple of slides here that I'll talk to, and then I'll hand across to Luke to talk about the eligible expenditure. But there were just a couple of areas where we've made some updated clarifications to the general guidelines. And if you look at those general guidelines on our website, so if you go to the GDSR section of our website, you'll see there's a resources section for helping you to apply. And the general guidelines are sitting in there. And on page 3 of them, we've got a table that just distills down the half a dozen clarifications that we've made. So it's a shorthand for you to see it there, and then you can make sure you can familiarise yourself with the guidelines document. But we also wanted to do this webinar and actually pull them out individually and just talk through them so that everybody felt really clear on things that had been added. And as I said before, they're not material changes to criteria or additional expenditures, but we had some very useful conversations with applicants through the pilot phase, seeking a bit of additional clarity and information so that they could put forward the most accurate expenditure and information to us. And so really the learnings from that process and anything else that's come up from applicants asking us through the general registration, we're not sure about this, can we ask you about this? If we felt that it was material enough, we've just wanted to add some extra detail around it. So the first one was around multi-company operating structures. And we've added these bullet points into the general guidelines just to say that we wanted to be really clear. So we've said to be eligible to independently claim for the rebate, if you've set up a subsidiary studio under a parent company, it must be constituted as a separate legal entity. So in general, that would mean a separately registered limited liability company. And as a separate legal entity, those eligible studios can claim against eligible expenditure incurred only by that particular entity. So the kind of the policy intent behind this was, we really do, the GDSR itself and NBN in our conversations, we want to encourage genuine spin-off studios, to grow the sector and see that happen. What we wanted to be clear on in terms of this eligibility criteria was just that we wanted to prevent any kind of misuse of the GDSR. If you like, we wanted to prevent, say, large studios kind of dominating the GDSR, or sort of setting up hollow subsidiaries in order to kind of circumvent the $3 million cap per entity. So we've just added this additional clarification into the guidelines. And Luke, if you flip to the next slide, we wanted to try and make it extra clear. So we talked about, oh, sorry, this is the next point. So then if we go to the next slide, Luke, this one's about the definition of general public release. So in the general guidelines at the moment, this is one of the stipulations around the definition of an eligible game. But there's nuance in this that we had a few applicants ask us about. So we've added these two examples into the general guidelines as a way to try and give a bit more of an indication of what we mean by general public release. So something that wouldn't be eligible in this example, and this came up a little bit talking about serious games. So if a game's been made available for use only in a private club, or for example, participants enrolled in a course or members of a professional association, that's not considered general public release, so it wouldn't be eligible. But for example, there might be a serious game that's been developed and made for surgeons, and as long as it still met the definition of a serious game under the GDSR criteria, as long as it was, say, made available on a public access platform like Steam, then that felt like it still fits within the intent of this criteria and it would be deemed to meet the eligibility criteria. So we've added that detail into the general guidelines. We're very happy to have individual kind of case-by-case conversations with applicants as you're preparing your final applications, just to make sure we're in the right zone here with what this definition means. So we're very happy to have those conversations as we go. And those were the two main ones that just pertain to kind of general criteria. What we'll dive into now, and Luke will take over for the next couple of slides, is where we've wanted to add some more detail around specifically eligible expenditure. So Luke, I'll hand across to you to talk through those aspects.
Well, thanks, Amy. Kia ora, everyone. So my name's Luke. I'm the assistant accountant here at New Zealand On Air, doing a lot of the GDSR work. And as probably mentioned before, I do play quite a lot of games. So if you're ever wondering in the webinars what game I'm playing, you just look at my background, because that's basically updated to what I'm playing at any one time. So that's a tradition I've started. I think I'm going to keep running with that. So talking about some clarifications on the eligible expenditure, this is sort of the same thing that Amy was talking about. We just wanted to dive down into some of the problem areas and make some clarifications. So if this would just, before we get through this, I just wanted to pull your attention to this. This is an extract from the guidelines on the website, one of the resources. Just one thing that we wanted to make really clear is what counts under well-structured market remuneration packages. So from I down to IX, you see all these points here, and what we basically wanted to make sure that people knew is that these only count in relation to employment or remuneration packages. So these items are eligible if your employees or your staff perform the work. So a good example for this is marketing. So for example, the costs of an employee hired in the marketing space, their salary would be an eligible expense, but the cost of the marketing itself, like hiring a billboard, would not be an eligible expense. So that's one of the clarifications I just want to make clear, because it'll probably give you a better frame for what we're going through next. This is one of the new updates, and it just talks about what's included in a remuneration package. So it may comprise of annual leave, KiwiSaver contributions, sick leave entitlements, and incentives stipulated upfront in the employment agreement. And the other important piece here is the training. So we didn't have anything specifically set in the GDSR guidelines that talked about training, but we just wanted to emphasize here that training can be included if it's being performed by a staff member in a game development role, and it relates to game development. So things like admin or basic training on a finance system likely wouldn't, but if you were, putting your developers on a course for a new game engine, things like that, that would be included.
And just to add to that, Luke, if you go back to that slide, I think the key thing here is being able to see that these are identifiable within the remuneration packages. So it's about things that sort of goes back to that well-structured remuneration package. So it's about knowing that these are factored into the salaries and packages for individuals, and that counts for things like incentives or bonuses as well. As long as that's factored into the salaries and that can be demonstrated, those things can count as eligible.
Our next point is website expenditure. This kind of wasn't really covered very well in the wording, so we've just added that websites expenses will qualify if your game is directly hosted on the website. If the website serves as a marketing platform and does not host the game, then the associated costs, unless it's the cost relating to the employee, updating the website, is not considered eligible. So yeah, if your website hosts the game, you can include that. The next piece we have is eligible meeting attendance. So this kind of talks to, this is more important for claims where the roles are not directly involved as game development roles. So things like your executives, CEs, that sort of thing, where you may need to calculate your meeting attendance through the year, or how much work you do that relates to game development, compared to when your day job might not be doing that every day. So the bold piece is quite important here. If staff member who's wholly assigned to game development, they do not need to calculate their attendance at general meetings versus game development meetings. But for executives and other staff whose roles are not wholly assigned to game development, the time allocated to the development meetings can be averaged over a 3-month period to determine the total allocation across the eligibility period. So that's so that you don't have to go through and count every single meeting you've had for the last year and add all that up to get a percentage.
And
that's going to be important for the apportionment piece, which we'll get into soon. But yeah, sorry, Amy.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, because Lance covered this really well in his webinar last week, talking about that pro rata approach. And I think we had some conversations from applicants. I actually think it was something that was in our statement of readiness that we'll go back and check, where it had looked like the applicant was expected, say that the staff member or the salary was kind of wholly assigned to game development, that it had looked like maybe they would have to differentiate between general meetings that individual was attending versus game development. And of course, that would have been an incredibly onerous task. So this is why we've added this clarification. It's related to both those areas Luke mentioned. It's if someone is wholly assigned to game development, you don't need to be doing that distinction and breaking out general meetings, because overall their salary, their role, their employment is wholly assigned to game development. Then on the other side, as Luke mentioned, we want to put a really kind of rigorous lens across executives or staff members who aren't wholly assigned to game development, but we wanted to acknowledge, and this had come back a lot from feedback from game studios, is when you're small studios as well, there's across the suite of roles in an organization, there's often a lot of involvement in game development in other areas, or product reviews, like Lance mentioned, where you might have your chief executive involved in those types of meetings. So as Luke says, we wanted to acknowledge whether that was genuine mahi happening around game development, but we would put a higher level of rigor around expecting to see some demonstration of how that pro rata approach was being taken, and we hold the right to ask for further questions if we want to make sure that that C-suite executive, for example, is attending those types of game development meetings. How can we make sure that that's demonstrated, just so that we've got a really robust layer across that?
The next point is game engine expenditures. So this is just something we updated, which is part of the specific inclusions. And I believe, I'm not wrong, Amy, that this is outside of the remuneration package. This is just a specific inclusion in the GDSR. Correct. So we just had expenditure on underlying game infrastructures, such as game engines. We've just updated that to, and again, Lance touched on this in the last webinar, that it excludes back-end royalties tied to unit sales. So yeah, pretty straightforward. If you do have any questions, then please let us know. And then I just wanted to also talk about a new resource we have on the website. It's actually a resource that was sent out with your statement of readiness. I'm hesitant to call it a template. I prefer the term of an example workbook, and this can be found under the GDSR section on our website under additional resources. This was kind of a set out of what your kind of application might look like for determining how much you are applying for. So along the bottom, you can see where I've just highlighted where it says general expenses workbook. There are a whole lot of tabs along the bottom that start from company structure or summary of overall company structure, the project eligibility, other funding sources, general expenses and employee expenses, etc. So this is just kind of shows how you might set out, and this could be perhaps a dump from your finance system, or it could be, pulled from somewhere else and then copied into something like this. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. This is just an example of what you could do. But the important things here is that you capture the main points of what the GDSR lets you apply for. So things like consulting fees, hosting services, and due subscriptions. These would all fall under things like general expenses. If you don't want to use this one, that's absolutely fine. But just noting the highlighted pieces here, things like description is super important because we need to know what the service or what the thing is to know if it's eligible. The status, if you believe it's eligible or not. So sometimes it might actually be easier to do a full dump, and then rather than go through and delete every line that's not relevant, you can just have a status piece and have it as no, and then you've got another piece on the right side that has the claimable percentage. So that's where you can assign a proportion, or maybe it's not eligible at all, so you put 0% there, and then that way, because this is done in an Excel workbook, that way when it comes to summing everything up, it just makes it slightly easier for everyone to follow and know what's included and what's not. So I would encourage everyone to look at that and see how that might work for you in your business. It doesn't have to be as detailed. You might find it easier, making your own or pulling it straight from your finance system and manipulating it the way you want. But just as long as we get the main points across, then that's fine. So yeah, please look at that resource. Cool.
Right.
Next, we're going to talk about the final application process. So this is going through the portal that we have. That's the link to the portal there. That is now live. It went live on the 1st of April and will close the business at 5 p.m. on the 30th of April. Is that correct, Amy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you get to the funding portal and you see this page, well done, you're in the right place. So this is where you sign in. This is what it should look like. This is where you enter. You should already have an account and everything like that made to get to this point anyway. So once you sign in here, you are then presented with this dashboard. Please apply for the GDSR application and not any of the others, because it will be very hard for us to find, and it will probably get missed. So just make sure that you select the GDSR application, and you just click down the bottom there. It says apply for this funding round. This is going through now the application form. A lot of this is probably some stuff that you would have seen before. Really basic information here. Just noting that anything with a star, it has to be filled in for you to move forward. So just please keep an eye on anything that's got a star on it. So yeah, this is just basic applicant details. The role is important for us because it helps us know who in the company is going to be using these forms the most, and it can inform how we can update it and improve it. The next piece we have will be the eligible expenditure. So this form can't really be done until you've kind of gone through that workbook and manipulated all your data to determine what is eligible for your company. So we imagine that's what will take the bulk of the time to do, and then coming to do the form is kind of one of the last things that we do once you have an idea of what you have. So this just has some information here about the figure should count from expenses between April 1st till the end of March. There should be a 20% of the overall of your eligible expenditure. There's a cap of 3 mil. And another important point here, especially for only for really the pilot phase participants, if you do think there was anything in your pilot phase that you believe, maybe since these clarifications you believe should be included, then please get in touch with Chantel and we can go through that on a case-by-case basis.
And also just noting on that point, Luke, as well, that just in case others weren't aware, so the pilot phase was for 6 months of incurred expenditure that ended 30 September last year. So it went 1st April to 30 September 2023. So this is some of the pilot phase applicants who didn't reach their $3 million cap will come in for the remaining 6-month expenditure. So that's why there's, to Luke's point, there's that note in there as well, in case any of the clarifications that we've subsequently gone through, that people feel they want to look back over that previous 6 months expenditure and actually come and talk to us about applying for that. We'll just, as per the note, if you contact Chantel in the first instance, we'll pick that conversation up directly.
Yep. Cool. Now we get into the fun stuff, financial statements. Okay, so this is where we would upload I won't say that it should be a zip file, because there should be multiple files included in this, because we are asking for things like audited financial statements if possible, otherwise management accounts, plus your workbook or your whatever evidence you've used to get to the amount that you're requesting for, plus a whole list of other financial information where we've been over a few times, and you can find all in the guidelines and the financial information required documents on our website. I won't name them all because it's just probably slightly pointless here, but just a few things to note here. We've got a naming convention there for your how to name your zip file. The more importantly is that all financial information must be converted to New Zealand dollars with the exchange rate calculated at the day of payment. If it's not in New Zealand dollars, it's likely that we just have to either come back to you or not be able to assess it in any other currency. So that's a big thing. Any expenses you believe that would be eligible for game development software, for example, you can add a column in your spreadsheet with an explanation of why or how you think this should be eligible, and we can take that as, that's not to say that it will be if it's not covered, but it does mean that we can take it into consideration, and it can also flow into the changes in the future. We've got a 2-year review, so this kind of information is really good for that. So we can feed back to MB and the government and say this is really what we need to see with the scheme.
Just on that as well, Luke, because I think it is worth, if you're not sure on anything, talk to us first, because there is quite prescriptive around game development software. It's not for general software licensing costs that you might use for game development in ways like Slack, examples like that, but it's got to be around specific game development software. So if there's anything you're just unsure of, it's just really pays to come to us first so we can have the conversation up front, so you're clear on what should and shouldn't go into the final application. And to Luke's note, that 2-year review, as he mentioned, is going to be a really interesting opportunity to kind of debrief as a sector, look at what came through, and really kind of consider, are there any changes or any inclusions? It's not easy to make. I know Lance made a really good point about this last week around the current economic environment we're in, the fact that there's already some kind of quite, I think, world-leading aspects to the GDSR in terms of inclusions and things. So it's not guaranteed that changes will be able to be made, but it's certainly a conversation we want to have with the sector and look to create, potential cases for why some of those changes might happen. And sorry, Luke, I also just wanted to note Courtney's dropped a question in the chat around, do you need finals or a draft's okay? And I think that popped up around, I don't know, Courtney, whether you were referring directly to financial statements here. I don't know if you can provide a little bit more detail to us on that question.
I would imagine that's financial statements. Yeah, so if we are talking about financial statements, obviously, and again, Lance alluded to this, it's almost impossible to get your financial statements audited and finalized in the time that you have, from the end of March till the end of April. So in that case, we are asking for draft or management accounts, whatever you can get us that has your financial information, basically. Management accounts are good because generally it's, it's updated monthly and throughout the year, so it shouldn't change too much for the end of the year. So yeah, drafts and management accounts is fine for there. It doesn't have to be audited financial statements.
And I think this was also mentioned in last week's webinar, but we will do, there's a sort of added layer of spot checks and audits that we're likely to do with the final applications that come through to us. So again, on a case-by-case basis, we'll just work with the applicants because of the level of financial information you can provide us doesn't feel as robust as it kind of potentially needs to be. We might work with you around whether that's a case for doing an audit after the fact. So there's just a level of security and assurance around that processing of that application.
And yeah, again, the final point there, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but there is some great resources on our website. Please check that out. It should have everything you need on the guidelines for eligible expenditure, reporting requirements, and what documents you need. We'll just move on to the next point. This is kind of information that you may have seen before, but we just want to make sure it's front of mind when you are doing this application. Non-eligible game development. So please highlight any costs or associated costs with non-eligible games. So games that might have gambling services or gambling elements, and explain how the costs are allocated if it's a pro rata basis, if you're using a timesheet, or if it's just, if you're doing it on a project basis, that's probably a little bit easier because you can just exclude those projects from your application. But if you do want any more information about ineligible games, there is a document there that has a whole section on it. Other funding sources, this is indicating that if you've received basically any other funding from the government, domestic or international, or grants, please disclose that information. And then additional financial statements and information. This is kind of just opens it up to if you feel like you have something that would really help us in assisting, your eligibility or your application, then feel free to include that. Also, just wanted to note that we probably, I foresee us, working quite closely with the applicants around this. So if we do get in contact with you, it's not a reflection on, the job you've done as your application. It's just the matter of the beast that we were dealing with is that we'll just have to work pretty closely together on that. But we won't understand your business from just looking at a spreadsheet. So there will be questions, I'm sure, from both sides.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's a little checkbox there to confirm that you've reviewed this information, just so that we know that people are seeing this and it's not a gotcha moment. Okay, so this is where you would upload your financial statements. So again, probably going to be in multiple documents. So you'd use a zip file here and the additional supporting documents, and then just, again, any comments that you think would be important. This is the piece that stipulates the other funding you may have received. So the idea is that you include funding from the application period, so from 1st of April 2023 to 31st of March 2024. The GDSR doesn't cover expenditure that's already funded by the grants. So if you've got, work such as R&D grants or grants from code, etc., you can't double dip or claim for them twice. So that's why we just have this piece here. So if you do have anything like that, please provide the name, agency, and any amount received in NZD. And now we're into the project details. So this is about the eligible games themselves, or assets, or whatever it is that your company does. So does the expenditure relate to development of eligible games for public release? This goes back to what we talked about earlier in the webinar about the updates to public release. You can find that information in the GDSR guidelines. And then we're asking for some documentation for the game development projects you're claiming. So for each project, we've got a list of things that we'd like to see included. I don't know if I should, go through every point here. It's pretty self-explanatory. Project title, project description, genre, game engine, platform, just so we have some information about what the game is, and that helps us make a call around eligibility. Additional information. So This is probably something that's slightly less relevant for your application, in terms of getting the money, but more relevant for us to feedback to the industry and to MBE to gather as much data as we can around for the industry to help improve, and it helps us to, I guess, talk about what levels, if the funding is the right level, if we have enough money coming through, etc. So is there anything you want to say with that one?
I can add to this as well, Luke, because I think one of the things that we're really conscious of is wanting to ensure that we're tracking efficacy of the scheme and working alongside the sector to do that. So the ideal here is that we can start to create baseline data and track over time, are we seeing increases in terms of employment and growth and scale of the organisation, which won't be wholly correlated to the GDSR, but might largely have been able to contribute towards it. So that's why these questions are in here. Some are mandatory. A couple have the asterisks beside them. So things like gathering the numbers of employees and contractors at the time of application. That kind of data is really essential in terms of looking at impact of the GDSR over time, and understanding percentage of revenue that's international versus domestic. There's some other ones like, what are your primary challenges? Those ones are optional. So if you as an organisation are able to share, what challenges you're seeing, it's just, this is kind of really deep contextual information for us that can help with that 2-year review conversation, and it can just help us working alongside MB just to consider the impact of the GDSR overall. And I just noticed, Jill, you've popped a question in the chat that says, do we need to get approval status for the GDSR statement of readiness? Portal just says submitted. And so, yeah, that's a great question. And so, no, you don't need an approval status. The statement of readiness was not a kind of pass-fail process. It was just a mechanism by which we could learn a bit more about each applicant and where they were at with kind of different things around records management and financial reporting, etc. So you're all good as far as I'm aware, and Chantal will be able to confirm this if she's here, but everybody filled in their statement of readiness form, which was required of them. So I think the portal's just wanting to make sure that you're self-acknowledging that you completed the activity and sent it back to us, but there's no kind of fail, pass, or approve that's required.
Hang on. Okay, so
then I think the next slide might be me. That's next steps, isn't it?
Next steps, yep. Handing back to you, Amy.
Great. So this was a snapshot of the timings for everyone, which hopefully you'll be aware of. We've been putting out this type of information in our newsletters. If you haven't signed up for, please do, because it's the best way to get the direct information from us in the most timely fashion. And it's up on our website as well. But just to reiterate that we've got the portal opened on the 1st of April. The deadline is the 30th of April. So it's a tight turnaround. So as Luke said, just please be in touch with our team. We want to be able to support everybody to get their final applications in. If there's anything you're not sure about, we're here to help and support so that everybody can get the information collated in time. Then we will be heads down, tails up, April to June, deep into assessment land. And, hopefully if we get any early applications coming into us, we'll just get straight on to start assessing those from the 1st of April. And as Luke mentioned, we'll likely be in touch with people as we start sifting through and going deep into the data that's been provided, and we'll follow up to confirm anything. We're not going to make any assumptions, and if we can see any gaps in information, etc., we'll come back to you. Then the plan here is that letters of offer will go out to people confirming the levels of funding that they're that has been deemed eligible, and that will happen around mid-June at this stage. And what we're hoping timings wise is that then the earliest we can get invoices in from people once they've got their letter of offer would be the 21st of June. So you'd be expecting to get letters of offer before then, and I think for sure we'll create some more concrete dates as we move through the assessment process so people might know exactly when letters of offer can be expected, so you're not just waiting around. We'll be saying this is the date you can be expecting to receive them. And then our plan as well is that we just start processing those payments as soon as we get the invoices in, and that'll happen across June, July, as early and as soon as possible, so we're getting money out the door to people. And I think that is us. Were there any other questions? Oh, I think Joy, you were going to jump in, weren't you?
I was going to ask exactly the same question as you, Amy. If anybody has any questions, feel free to pop those into the chat box now so the team can answer them. That was really interesting, and it was really great to see the more expressed definitions there that you provided.
Right.
So I found it really interesting, and I'm sure the people that are watching felt that too.
Oh,
So
and just on that, Joy, is just a thank you to the people who did feedback as well and provided that input, because it means we can do more of that mahi around clarification. So we really appreciate it. People who put their hand up and were like, this doesn't feel quite clear enough. So yeah.
fantastic, fantastic. All right, I can't see anything being added into the chat box now. I'll just give a little update on another event and we'll check that. And if there is nothing left, then we'll say goodbye. So next week, I'm actually hosting a wellbeing workshop, and it's titled the Wellbeing Deck. It's a way to tap into your own wellbeing insights. So Tamara, who'll be leading it, she'll take us through an understanding of what it means to feel low, to thrive, and what it takes to get from one place to the other. There aren't any more questions, so thank you so much for joining us today. We'll make this video available on our YouTube channel next week. Last week's webinar with Lance Burgess around accounting for the GDSR is available up on YouTube right now. Unless you've got anything else to say, Amy and T?
No, just thank you again for hosting us. We really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
If you do, if there are any questions that you come up with and you don't want to put them here, then please feel free to just email through to the Games Rebate inbox and we can answer it from there.
Fantastic. All right, well, time to say goodbye. So, here, Marie, Matewa, see you all soon. Bye.